Alex Ferguson has sent shockwaves around the internet with his latest statements in his autobiography, claiming that he only coached 4 world-class players in his long history as a manager. Ben's laughing already because
I'm laughing at Sir
Alex Ferguson. Do you know what's even funnier?
So dumb.
Is Jason then
so
asked me
dumb.
like how many American coaches could be knighted? Did you? This was before I had to tell him.
I
you had
said
to
not
be,
how many. I said can an American be knighted?
I think you have to be a subject of the Queen to be knighted.
Yes, you're right. So here's Sir Alex Ferguson. Good point.
So you can never become Sir Ben Mankiewicz.
And I can never become a president.
I feel like I'd turn it down. It's too silly.
That is double high five. There you go.
Silly.
Turn her down. As soon as she goes to place that sword on your shoulder, just go, nah. And I would stand up and walk away.
With all due respect. Like,
No
I got
respect.
it. With no respect at all.
For the Queen.
For the Queen. No, it's like, and then, okay, it's one thing, you might do it because the Queen you don't want to disrespect the Queen.
No, you want to disrespect.
I got it. You're a revolutionary, free Scotland rebel. I'm sorry, free Ireland. But like, it's just ridiculous to call yourself Sir. It is. All the actors, so dumb. It's so antiquated. It seems so pompous.
But it fits with the people who like encompass that character, like Sir Ian McKellen. Like I'm like, all right, he's Gandalf. You know what I mean? You have to give him Sir. He plays that role.
He did a couple of things before Gandalf.
No, he wasn't. He was never called Gandalf.
All right, go on.
Gandalf the Grey and then Gandalf the White, right? Is that what you meant? Mm-hmm. All right. So Sir Alex Ferguson, to get back on track, he named 4 players, and I'll tell you, we'll throw up some images of those guys. But Ryan Giggs, one of the longest-serving player at Manchester United, legendary player. Paul Scholes, who could ping a ball like no other, even the best players from more luxurious places like Spain, Xavi, all those guys from the nicer parts of the world stated that they still couldn't contemplate how someone like Scholes could ping the ball so well. Eric Cantona, phenomenal French player, and Cristiano Ronaldo. So this poses a question, and I wanted to ask Ben about this
So to
as
be
well.
clear, he said he's only coached 4 world-class
players. So
and who are some of the players that he has coached who he did not put in that
David
category?
Beckham. So Beckham, as everyone in the United States knows, more so for his hair than anything else, actually was a phenomenal player and phenomenal passer of the ball and probably the best set-piece taker we've seen, or one of the best. Played with Real Madrid, had a good impact there. I thought he was a great player, but I actually agree. I don't think he was world-class. And Beckham himself doesn't argue this either. He's stated.
It's because Beckham became more of a brand than he became a world-class player. So, I mean, it's not so much that he was left off the list, but he probably deservingly was left off the list.
Yeah, he wasn't class. And he himself came out and says, he's right, I wasn't world-class. But a player that I think was world-class was Roy Keane, and that's because he's one of my heroes. World-class, I think many people just associate with talent and everything else that goes along with it.
And did Ferguson coach?
Yes, they had a kind of tiff. They had a little shaky relationship. Like Roy Keane is very, I would say, demanding as a captain, but he was Manchester United. He is considered to be the best midfielder to have ever played in the Premier League, or one of them, him and Patrick Vieira and a bunch of guys in there. So it kind of confuses me is how can he be considered to be one of the best ever in the Premier League, but not be considered world class? And he then came out in his autobiography, Alex Ferguson stated that Keane is up there, but he was more so a hard worker who just led the team rather than being world class. So that's why I want to ask you guys about all sports. Like, do you consider someone world class but you get people that work really hard but just maybe don't have as much talent as some of the players, but they still lead a team? Do you consider those guys world class, or do you think there's a certain category that people who are world class fall into?
So one example that comes to mind that's not world-class, but is a leader of a team in a way, is recently of the Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green, because he was, as they put it, as Stephen Curry put it, as Steve Kerr put it, he's the heart and soul of that team. He plays with passion, he plays with fire, and he is a team leader. Ben's laughing because obviously...
Smirking.
He's laughed twice in this clip.
Sir Ben Mankiewicz with a smug smirk. But we move because Draymond Green is not a world-class player, not even close. But he is a leader of a team, and I understand where that example can come into play. Having said that, Stephen Curry is a world-class player, but maybe not so much as a team leader as some of the other players that he's around.
Nothing is more arbitrary than the assessment of what meets world class, and clearly for Ferguson, he's 70. How long did he coach?
I don't even know that answer. He's coached for years, and he was considered to be...
I think longer than all of us have been alive.
Considered to be the best manager ever, and that's through his time and the things that he's accomplished.
Obviously, if a guy who's coached better than 3 decades, and maybe it's 4 decades, right? You know, a guy like that to only name 4 players as world class, he has put to him, that doesn't mean he hasn't coached 50 guys who are like, oh my God, they're phenomenal.
Yeah,
they're unbelievable. Exactly. But there's something special about Jordan, and that's why Steph Curry, you couldn't yet say that about. If we're using the Sir Alex Ferguson standard, one title, one great season.
Right.
That's not enough.
No.
You got to do it over a significant period of time. My hunch is he'll do it.
So there's a period of recency bias to what I just said.
There's a period of recency bias to everything you say.
Well, maybe because recently I've only been alive for X amount of time. But so in that case, Ben, who would you consider? LeBron James is the only world-class player in the NBA.
LeBron James
is Tom Brady the only world-class quarterback in the NFL?
No, of course. Peyton Manning is world-class. Although, again, you might take away from it because the playoff performance is so dramatically different.
You're already contradicting your Peyton Manning being world-class.
I just thought of him, and then I'm making a point. It took me 1 second. I contradicted it maybe half a second later. That's not really a contradiction. I'm saying by that standard, maybe Peyton Manning wouldn't be world-class, right?
Thank you.
But no, obviously, guys, but then you take a quarterback who's been sensational, terrific, like Tony Romo, right? Nobody would consider Tony Romo world-class, despite the fact that his numbers are
up there.
Those numbers are outstanding. Then you look at some of these, Calvin Johnson. Is Calvin Johnson world-class? I would say on this standard, if you're putting for a guy who coached for 40 years, 30 years, we're making it up, 30 years.
No, it's a long time.
And only picked 4 guys that I would say, no, he isn't. And maybe Brady is the only one off the top of my head. And in the NBA, maybe playing now, right now, the only guy who's done it would be LeBron. Clearly, I think by the time this group of young players in the NBA is done, there will be more. There obviously Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. There's no way around it. Those guys were world-class players.
It's like in a similar category. It's just like Phil Jackson turning around and going, all those years at the Lakers, the only people that were really world-class were Kobe, Shaq, and the guy who's dating Iggy Azalea.
I don't like. Kobe drives me crazy, but I forgot he was playing because he's played so infrequently the last years. But Kobe would have to.
Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with Alex Ferguson's list?
I agree with those players, undoubtedly, but I have a lesser. I think I have a different way of thinking who's world class because I haven't coached for as long as he has, and he's got obviously a unique perspective because he is.
You haven't coached for.
I put that in there. I coached my little league team or whatever they're called, under the soccer board.
Your fantasy football team?
I've coached some 4 world class
fantasy football teams.
Nobody's going to watch this clip and think that you people should be independent.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But there's one thing he did say, which obviously unsettled the Messi fanboys from around the world, is that he then went and took it another level, and he said that of those 4 world class, Cristiano Ronaldo is still just a little pet. He's the monument on top of his fireplace. He said he's the best player he's ever coached, and I think that's 2 sides of it. I think that it's because he is a great player. There's no doubt, and he was part and parcel the reason why Ronaldo is where he is. Because Alex Ferguson is a great man manager. And when Ronaldo came, skinny, we talked about this, skinny, ugly, no real focus on the game, was all tricks with no real final product. And Alex Ferguson helped sculpt him to the player that he is. So obviously he's putting him atop that list because he wants to take credit as well.
Let me say this about what that may, and I of course I'd never heard of Alex Ferguson until we started this clip.
That's crazy.
Because I'm an American. Comments below. But it speaks well of Ferguson that a guy who's 74 years old, going to turn 74 later this year, recognizes that is not just hearkening back to the good old days and thinks guys don't play the same way anymore. He's like, no, this. I've coached some great players from a different era. This guy playing now is the best. That speaks well of him. Maybe he is because he molded him, but it's not an outrageous thing to say.
No,
he may well be the greatest player ever, right?
He may. I don't think he's the greatest player ever, but he may be the greatest player that he's ever coached. But Ronaldo, if he's the greatest asset or greatest world-class player for Manchester United, I don't think he played as long as guys like Giggs and was involved in as many glory years as Ryan Giggs was. And he just is Mr. Man United because of how many years he played. And he's the assistant coach now as well. So he's been there for so long. But I do, to go back to Jason's point, I agree with the list he said, but I would add Roy Keane in there because for me, he just was world-class. He was a world-class midfielder. And I don't think there's much else to argue with because there was fantastic players in Man United's time. In his time in coaching, there's so many who have moved in and out that I can't even contemplate. Some of them were just so good. But if you were to give me a list and pick out the 4 or 5 best, that's who I would have picked out. But I don't consider certain differences between world class. But that's why I wanted to bring up the point, is that there's many athletes in the world who, through history, have got all the accolades and have been involved in great teams, but there's something that just separates world class from someone who is great but is involved in that. And I think, from my perspective, it's something unique about their game.
And the last thing I'll say on this, because we got to wrap it up, but we started talking about basketball. Basketball is easier to talk about than football, because football you end up really talking about the quarterbacks, because the other offensive players, they don't play as long as effectively. I mean, by the time almost every running back is 30, they're no longer effective, right? They're certainly as effective. Thomas Jones, notwithstanding. But in baseball, it's interesting that we've talked about soccer and basketball most, because those are the games where the star players stand out. Football is such a team game that it is hard to point out. Like, I instantly start as a guy who just retired this year. If you have this really elite standard for world class, is Troy Polamalu world class? I would say no. It was great. It was great. It was phenomenal. It was a great defensive player. But so it's really hard to do. It is really hard, because that kind of Jared Allen. No, it seems crazy. Those are crazy things to say, but those were impact defensive players for a very long time.
Yeah.
Is Darrelle Revis world class? Like, he's probably the best corner over the last 7 or 8 years, almost certainly.
I'd put Darrelle Revis as
Deion Sanders.
And probably
I'd put Darrelle Revis as a world class.
I'd maybe put Deion
back.
too. Yeah, maybe. But it's hard to do. It's hard to
and
say.
then the final point is that.
No, that was the final.
No, this is the final point.
No, we're done.
What Alex Ferguson finally said in the final point is, of those 4 players, they're all attacking players.
I was going to mention,
and that's the thing.
no
attacking
defenders.
players get more accolades than
No
defenders.
back-
That's just the way it
That
works.
way on offensive players do.
Peter
Every
Schmeichel,
sport.
goalkeeper, world-class goalkeeper. Another one I forgot.
Peter what?
Peter Schmeichel. Edwin van der Sar,
I love
world-class
his.
goalkeeper.
I love Schmeichel's videos on Saturday Night Live. Very funny.
And on that note, we'll end on a completely irrelevant point. Subscribe.